Hello, welcome back to Blender CC LiveNoding. In this episode, we're gonna take a look at repeat zone in Blender 4.0 alpha. Okay, so we actually fly into the future before with Blender 3.6 we actually have simulation zone, right? Simulation zone, and with simulation zone we have this ability to use time and kind of repeat kind of like a process of nodes inside the simulation zone. But I think if you find the simulation zones slightly confusing, you should actually take a look at the repeat zone, which is available in Blender 4.0. So with repeat zone is actually much simpler. There is no time involved unless you actually put time inside the repeat zone. So yeah, we can create this kind of thing that we created something similar in the past, but here we are actually using repeat zone. You can see here I can create 30 cube inside this repeat zone, and then we are using this similar join geometry. There is this add thing that's adding based on this iteration, it's adding the index so that each of the instance or each of the geometry inside the repeat zone will have its own ID. Okay, that's if that's a little bit confusing, let's actually go back to the first example. Okay, I'm using the default cube, and it's probably much simpler if we actually have this monkey head as well. Okay, you can see, okay, this is very basic example. The default cube goes inside the repeat zone, and inside the repeat zone we actually have this transform geometry, and we repeat it x times iterations. So this is 1 time, 2, 3. So if it's repeated 1 time, it will create a single duplicates of the original geometry. So you have 2, and then so on and so on until it gets smaller and smaller, because with the transform geometry here we translate it in the z-axis, and then we also rotate it, and then we scale it down. Okay, this should be pretty simple and pretty clear with the repeat input and output inside the repeat zone. If we didn't use the join geometry, what's gonna happen is we will actually so without join geometry, if we just transform the geometry, it's almost like it's applying the same nodes over and over without creating duplicates. Okay, so normally we actually want to have join geometry and then bring in the original geometry, and then so we have these duplicates happening. Okay, so that's the first example. The second example I want to show you. Okay, this is extrude on Suzanne and extrude on the default cube. So let's take a look. Extrude 1 time and scale elements 1 time. Okay, this is applying it on the default cube. If we do it twice, you can see it's doing the same thing, extrude and scale. Long time ago, actually, before we have geometry nodes, we actually do this using Sorcar add-on or Sverchok nodes. It's very similar. So extrude and scale, we can repeat over and over until it becomes like a fractal, and Blender might crash. It depending on your machine. Okay, because this is still alpha, so should be careful. Maybe I shouldn't do that. Just maybe force quit. Okay, or okay, go back to before. So that's the example with extrude mesh. The last one might be slightly more confusing. I actually like this one so much. So the ability, so we can see Okay, this is interesting, the way we can actually just animate the ID as well. I might actually use that at some point. So anyhow, we have a cube and we have this join geometry. So we are doing this duplications of the cube. We didn't bring in the input. Okay, so the default cube is not brought in. This is simply this cube that is being iterated 30 times, and the index get this add 1 for each iterations, and then for each duplications we actually randomize the position of the cube, and then also we randomize the value of this cube. Okay, this is cool. Why? Because this is kind of like a single object. You can actually, instead of using join geometry, you can use Boolean math and then use actually Boolean mesh and then use union. So if you bring in the geometry and then this guy goes in there. Now you see this is clean, and we can in fact do like a mirror. Turn on bisect, and we have something that I've shown you a while ago. It's kind of a way to create like a random shapes, and sometimes they resembles a face, sometimes this resembles like a robot. I don't know. I just kind of like this a lot. It's very basic, just random scale and random positions, and we have this ability now to just have how many cube we want, maybe 10, so it's gonna be a lot faster. We can scale this object and then just play with this ID. The ID will just kind of like a noise that goes around. I think the effect's kind of cool. And this is just the randomizations of the position. Okay, so yeah, that's repeat zone. So we can have like 20 cubes all with different size and different positions. Again, it's the same. It's kind of similar to simulation zone, but with the repeat zone, we don't actually need to scrub. We don't have time. It's actually doing it inside. So it's simpler concept than simulation zone actually. So you actually need, if you understand this before simulation zone, it's actually much better. So this is in Blender 4.0 alpha. So the one that's actually LTS at the moment is 3.6. 3.6 actually have simulation zone, so you can simulate hair and stuff. But with Blender 4.0, you have this repeat input, repeat output, and I think it's easier to understand than the other one, than simulation zone. Okay, so maybe you want to play around with this first before simulation zone. So let's see, yeah, join geometry or mesh boolean and union, and you can have this type of creations. Maybe if like randomize the rotations and stuff on this, and you're gonna have interesting shapes just for an ideas, for a concept. Okay, so yeah, you can pipe out this ID, or actually pipe out the seed. It's really up to you whether you want to animate the seed or actually animate the ID, whichever you like. Just pipe this outside, so you can now randomize like that. Okay, so that's repeat zone example. It's from the very basic, and also this is like random cube. It's actually the basic example, but it can give you some interesting result even with just this simple nodes. Okay, so hopefully you find this useful. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.